Alexander Gromov was the kind of man people called a shark in business. Stern, restrained, and cold-blooded. Behind him lay dozens of major deals, millions in the bank, and a whole army of subordinates who feared even the glance of his steel gray eyes. He was used to getting everything he wanted, and he tolerated no objections. But when his only son, Sergei, brought home the woman he wanted to marry, Gromov's iron mask cracked, not with joy or pride, but with a kind of silent, almost contemptuous disbelief. Her name was Lena, a delicate young woman with a gentle face, open expression, and kind eyes. She was educated, graceful, and carried herself with quiet confidence. And yet, in Gromov's view, she bore an unforgivable flaw. She had been born deaf and mute. Sergei's eyes shone as he spoke about her. He described their love with the passion of someone who had truly found a partner for life. He told his father how Lena worked as an architect, how she taught children with hearing impairments, how she was fluent in 3 different sign languages, and how she could type faster than most managers in his father's company could speak. But Alexander only sneered. An architect? A teacher? I don't care if she's an astronaut. She can't even say a simple hello like a normal person. His voice was sharp, like a knife. That's weakness, son. Weakness beside a man leads to failure. Sergei's face flushed. Father, you don't understand. She's stronger than half the colleagues you respect. If you would just try to see for even a moment. Enough. Gromov's hand cut the air like a blade. His decision was final, as it always was. You want to prove she's worth anything? Fine. I'll take her with us tomorrow. We have a meeting with the Japanese investors. Let her show what she can do. But don't blame me when you see her fall silent at the first question. Sergei paled. But Lena, standing quietly nearby, had already read everything on his lips and from his gestures. She didn't flinch. She only nodded once calmly. Yes, she would go. Gromov felt a grim satisfaction. Tomorrow, she would fail. And then Sergei would finally see with his own eyes. What Gromov didn't know was that it wouldn't be Lena who learned a lesson the next day. It would be him. The next morning, the office on the 48th floor gleamed like a fortress of steel and glass. Floor-to-ceiling windows revealed the city drowned in a silver fog, but inside the atmosphere was far from calm. This was not just another business meeting, it was the final round of negotiations for one of the largest construction contracts in years. Alexander Gromov, in his flawless gray suit, sat at the head of the long polished table. His expression was carved from stone. On his left sat his personal interpreter, nervous already. On his right, Lena. She wore a light pantsuit, her hair neatly pulled back, her face serene. On her lap rested a notebook, a pen, and a small tablet with a discreet sign language translation app. She sat still, watching, waiting, wasting no movement. The Japanese partners were unfailingly polite, but tension buzzed under their composure. The sticking point was architecture. Certain design choices made them uneasy, and they wanted answers, precise, technical answers. They began to ask questions, gently but insistently. The interpreter struggled. Specialized terminology tripped him up. His voice faltered. Sentences grew awkward, imprecise. Gromov's eyes slid toward Lena. He narrowed them, a smirk already forming deep inside. Now she'll see. Now she'll realize she doesn't belong here. But then Lena lifted her head. Slowly, unhurriedly, she stood. And then she began to speak. Not with her voice, but with her hands. It was not the clumsy, hesitant signing Gromov had imagined. It was precise, elegant, fluent Japanese sign language. One of the investors' eyebrows shot up. He glanced at his colleagues. Within seconds, the atmosphere shifted. Their eyes lit up. One of them even clapped his hands softly, a gesture of polite admiration. They answered her in sign language, and she responded, fluidly, gracefully. The exchange was rapid, technical, crystal clear. They discussed design features, logistics, materials, all with a level of detail and clarity that left the interpreter unnecessary. For the first time in years, Alexander Gromov was speechless. He sat motionless, his jaw tight, but not from anger. From shock. Everything he had assumed about Lena, her silence, her weakness, her supposed uselessness, was collapsing in front of him. And the negotiations? They didn't just continue, they flourished. Smiles spread across the Japanese investors' faces. They nodded, they leaned forward, their eyes respectful. At last, one of them spoke softly, in careful Russian through the interpreter. You have a truly valuable specialist. We were prepared to withdraw, but now, we are convinced. This project deserves our trust. And it is thanks to this young woman. The room fell silent. Even Gromov hadn't realized he was half standing from his chair, as if wanting to say something, defend himself, perhaps, or thank her, but no words came. For once, the master of business had no language. Because in that moment, he finally saw, beside him wasn't a mute girl. Beside him was someone who heard more deeply than any of them. After the meeting, they left the tower together. Usually after such victories, Gromov felt the sharp satisfaction of control, of conquest. Not today. Today he felt something entirely different. Shame. Not in front of the investors, before himself. Sergei was radiant, his pride in Lena almost glowing. Lena, as always, was calm. She asked for no recognition, no praise. She had simply done what needed to be done. The car ride back was silent. But not the heavy silence of resentment. This was the silence of thought. Through the rearview mirror, Gromov studied her face. Memories spun in his mind, his cruel words, his dismissive sneers, his confident predictions of her failure. And here she sat, steady, dignified, having proven not only her worth, but his blindness. At last, he broke the silence. "Where did you learn Japanese Sign Language?" Lena turned, smiled faintly, took her notebook, and wrote. "I knew that someday I might be surrounded by people who saw only my limitations. I wanted to be able to speak in a language they would understand." The words struck him like a blow. He had thought her weak. But here she was, prepared, determined, wise. She hadn't trained for failure. She had prepared for the moment she would be able to show who she truly was. He swallowed hard. His voice faltered. He had never apologized in his life. Especially not to those he deemed beneath him. But now he reached for her notebook, wrote slowly, awkwardly. "I was wrong. Forgive me." Lena didn't answer immediately. She looked at him, not with resentment, but with a quiet, respectful calm. Then she nodded once. And somehow, that was more powerful than any speech. Sergei saw everything. In that moment, he understood. His father wasn't just admitting a mistake. He was beginning to change. Lena had achieved what no one else had in years. Without words, she had transformed a man. The next morning, Gromov woke earlier than usual. For the first time in decades, his mind wasn't full of numbers, charts, and schedules. His heart ached with something new, something he couldn't quite name. Gratitude, perhaps. Or the longing to make things right. And instead of driving to the office, he drove to Sergei and Lena's small house. He found her at the kitchen table, sketching in a large notebook. It wasn't a corporate design, but something far more personal, a family home, with wide windows, a garden, a space for children. She hadn't heard him enter, but she sensed him. She turned and smiled, simply, warmly. Gromov sat across from her, watching the confidence of her hand as she drew. For a while, he said nothing. Then he took out her notebook and wrote, "I want to truly speak with you. Will you teach me?" Lena's eyes softened. She reached across, took his hand, and showed him the first sign. "Hello," he repeated, clumsy but earnest. She nodded, "Good." And so began his lessons, not just in sign language, but in patience, humility, openness. He visited often. He watched her teach children, he tried to read lips, he even helped with her projects. And slowly, steadily, he changed. One day, Sergei said quietly to him, "I don't know what exactly she proved to you, but you're not the same man anymore." And Gromov replied honestly, "She didn't prove anything. She simply was who she is." And that was enough for me to finally realize I've spent my life hearing only myself. Months passed. The day of Sergei and Lena's wedding arrived. When it came time for speeches, Alexander Gromov stood before the guests. He held the microphone in his hand. And then, to everyone's surprise, he lowered it. He turned to Lena. His hands trembled, but he began to sign. Not perfectly, not without mistakes, but sincerely. "You are the pride of our family. My voice is yours, now and always." The hall fell into silence. Then came the applause, not because he had changed his mind, but because he had finally learned to hear.